And hello, welcome back to the League of Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism, where we attempt to apply logic and reason to religion and politics. I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Christy Santiago.
Hi, guys.
And we're here with a special guest today, the author of the Humanist Codex, amongst other things, Nicholas Lamar Soutter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. We're very
my pleasure.
We like to bring atheists on and humanists on, and you seem to be a great voice for both. So we're really happy to have
you. I do my best. Thank you.
So we're going to jump into current events, news topic or two real quick. If you guys haven't seen, Tucker Carlson was on his own show, because probably no one else should ever happen. So we're having some fucker problems. He said some things about Ilhan Omar that were pretty blatantly racist. And he denies it, of course, as he always does. But he said things like, if I can just give a couple examples real quick, maybe you can add some more, Christy. But he said that Ilhan Omar hates this country. Like, after everything that our country has done for Ilhan Omar, she hates our country, and that she is the living embodiment of what is wrong with our immigration system. And if we don't change it, or we need to change it soon, or else, is how he left it. Do you have any more detail on that, Christy? Or
it's not so much detail. I had to watch it twice. The first time I watched it, I think I had to put my jaw back up. I didn't think he could even do that again or anymore. I didn't think I could be surprised by him. But it was a different level of just a different time, a time way before I was born, it felt like. It also brought me back to in the State House with Republican representatives sitting outside a representative meeting with posters of the 9/11 catastrophe with, the plane flying into the building, and below it, Ilhan Omar saying, never forget, we forgot. It's that same, what are they so scared of? And it is this. She is their fear. Their fear is that if we don't stop immigration right now, we're going to have more of her in this, in Congress. They're going to be taking over. And if you do things ethically and you treat people right, you would have no fear of others that are different than you having any kind of power, because you're egalitarian. And I see that so clearly now. Watching him on that the second time around, had to release my fists, like, wow, okay.
I did not plan on covering this week. That's like when I messaged you, I'm like, hey, we need to hit this at some point and like deep dive into it. But also, like, it's blown up, and I'm glad it's blown up.
Yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't just something like was glazed over this week.
Right.
Because I figured it would be. I'm just like, he says a lot of shit. I didn't think anyone would care.
Yeah, this one was really, really awful.
Yeah, it struck a nerve with like,
when he finished it with or else, that's not saying go out and hurt people, be violent, but it's also not saying that. And I know that's being vague, but you get a whole bunch of people riled up and scared for their nation, and then say or else.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's going to happen. You can't, if you say something like that, there's going to be consequences. And one of the things that I hear when someone does something like that, and we had a lot of this with Sarah Palin too, when she was talking about shoot 'em up, or that congressman who said, he had this great commercial. He wasn't a congressman. I'm not sure. I don't think he won, but he had this commercial about how this country was being lost, and he puts on like a Minuteman outfit, and then he says, "Get your guns."
Yep.
And I talk to people on the right about this, and they say, "Look, nobody could possibly think that this means, a call to action." Well, first of all, I'm not sure that's entirely true. But even if we grant that, certainly most, even the strongest Republicans aren't going to think that. The problem is there's always a fringe. And the problem is what you're doing is you're moving the needle on this, and you're causing more people who are kind of in the middle to move a little more to the fringe, the people who are on the fringe to move closer to actually doing some sort of action. And that's what instigates these kinds of things. And it smacks a lot of, too, the first time I really vividly remember this was when Glenn Beck asked, and unfortunately I've forgotten his name, but the first elected Muslim congressman, and said, "Prove to me you're not working for our enemies." And I'm sitting there going, by the way, what's the policy on swearing here? Because that deserves a swear. That deserves holy shit. That is not a oh gee gosh moment. That's a holy fucking shit. And he said that, I think he was on CNN at the time, which was shocking. And everything's moved further to the right. He of course went on to Fox. Fox is continuing to move. And the reason, Christy, I think that when you think it couldn't get any worse, it still does, is because Fox is they're losing their audience actually, because their audience is moving further to the right. So they are now adapting by moving further to the right to meet that audience. And that is dangerous. And the reason they're doing that is because, it gets complicated. I don't know that anyone wants to lecture on it, but Trump is certainly one of the ways he's succeeded is, and it's not just a throwaway line, oh, politics of fear versus politics of hope. It's not just a throwaway, because the problem is it is much easier to win by preying on more base instincts that we all have. All of us are scared of a lot of things. And honestly, quite rightly so in many cases. You should be scared. That's what keeps you alive. But if you can really antagonize that, people will suspend rational thought and say, I'm not sure I agree with what he said about taxes, or said about good government, or said about healthcare, or said about, a million topics. But I am scared, and he said he'll stop that. So I'm voting for him. And that's been extraordinarily effective. And until that gets fought, I think this is going to get worse.
I mean, we saw exactly that with, I'm sure you saw, you pay attention to the news about 5-6 months ago.
And until that gets fought, I think this is going to get worse.
I mean,
listen, could you play that again? I love listening to myself. I could listen to myself all, just please keep going.
Okay.
My favorite speaker's on.
About 5-6 months ago at a Republican something, I don't even remember what it was. I would have to look it up. But a woman stood up in the audience to give to have a comment. And her comment was, in America, I've never wanted a dictator or a dictatorship.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever a time for one, it would be now, and Trump's the man.
I saw that footage. It was pretty bumpy. I'm like, oh, gross.
Yes, and it's because
I thought she was going to go the opposite way.
Yeah, it's because of fear, though. Because you keep a society ignorant on a lot of things, like critical thinking and skeptical skills. If you keep them ignorant on these things, and you learn, there's so much to a campaign. There are psychologists involved, there's think tanks involved, and they also use marketing. Marketing works on human emotions. That's how they do it. And if you don't educate yourself, you don't know these things, and you're like, oh, but I felt something when I watched that. And if you're not aware, unfortunately, it sounds rudimentary and elementary that would happen to people, but it happened to me like 10, 15 years ago, watching, I would stick up for certain aspects and ideas, one of them being, because it was put into my head over and over again as a child growing up, that it would be better if a president was a businessman and just run this country like a business, because then...
Ross Perot, you're talking Ross Perot.
Yes, exactly. And that would be in the 90s. I was in high school. And I remember saying these things out loud. I do not feel that way. A nation is not a company. And a nation's sole purpose isn't the bottom line to make a dollar. I don't believe that at all, as, the adult me now.
Right.
but I thought these things because of fears that I had and education that I didn't get and indoctrination that I did get. And
Well, but it's not just that, and I don't think you should necessarily blame those things or hit yourself too hard for it. A large part of it is just this real deep desire we all have, and belief that we all have, especially when we're younger, that the world is a simple place, and you can break it down into sort of simple things, and that simple concepts work. The good guy doesn't always win, unfortunately, and there's good and bad in all places and in all people. You can't just when somebody says, well, look, it's just a business, so all you need is a businessman. If there's any way that you can make that make sense in your mind, you're like, wow, that makes things so much easier. Now voting becomes really easy. And all of us want that. I want that. We all want that. And fighting against it's just hard. And one of the things I've noticed too, I'm getting older. You couldn't tell, but I am.
beautiful.
Oh, thank you. But one of the things I realized too is I sort of have less energy for that. And so I was always wondering, is there a reason that as people get older, they get, why are old people so inflexible and all that other stuff? I think one of the reasons is you lose the energy and the time to sit there and try to figure everything out. And the world keeps moving quickly. And I think one of the things is the election of Barack Obama was stunning for everybody. I worked on his campaign. I joined when he was polling at 0.5% among Democrats. So he was in a field of 11, and I stayed on the campaign. I was the Connecticut's second district coordinator for the just sort of during the primaries. After the primaries, and then McCain said, "I'm going to." Sarah Palin is going to be my VP. I was like, I'm done. I'm out of here. You don't need me anymore. Thanks. Have a good one. I got kids. So, but I think one of the things is you don't need to be racist for that to have been scary. There are people who say, if that scared you or if you were bothered by it, you were a racist. I think if you were a racist, it obviously would. But one of the things is, I wasn't bothered or scared by it in that sense, but I never thought it would happen in my lifetime. I never really did. And I said, this world is moving faster than I thought. And I'm really glad that it's moving that fast. And I'm actually trying to push to move it faster. But I'm sitting there going, I can understand why if you have a hard time programming the clock on your VCR and getting it to stop blinking noon, if you have a hard time doing that, even if you're the most progressive of your generation, that's scary. Boys kissing is kind of scary. And it's just because it's unknown. It's because it violates things that you've been told time and time again, and it's changing. And people who are afraid of that speed and can't keep up with it, which is perfectly natural, and it happens to all of us. Society is going to move faster. Sort of the mean movement of society is going to be at a certain pace. There's going to be half below, half above. And those below, it's just they want it to slow down. The problem is slowing it down is going to be at the cost of other people's rights. So that's where the tension is.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to piggyback on that just a little bit because you worded that wonderfully.
Thank you.
Yeah, but people are afraid of change, even though many people are pushing for change so they have a better, more equal life and they have more freedoms, right? We want that. Like you said, we are trying to push the world to move faster in some ways. But again, it goes back to marketing a little bit because you said a lot of people are afraid of change. And conservatives came up with this great term, conservatives, which really makes you feel safe. Like if you think the world needs to slow down or just kind of go back to the good old days, you want to conserve things. You want things to be back to normal, how they ought to be. And I think Kyle Kalinske has pointed this out from from Secular Talk. They just do so much better than the left tends to do on marketing. Starting with the word conservative.
Well, they didn't. I think that word was actually prescribed. Was sort of more. I think. Okay. Well, we can get into the liberal conservative Republican Democrat switch, which a lot of Democrats say prove that Republicans have been evil since time incarnate, and liberals say prove that they've always been right. And it's a little both. The fact of the matter is, when you talk about who has done all of the legislation in this country that everyone, just think for a second. What is the piece of legislation that you are most proud of, that when you hear about, you say, I'm glad I'm an American and we did that? Even if it was a little late or whatever, we did it. This is what I'm proud of. I will, 99% chance it was passed by liberals. The other 99% chance is it was passed by Republicans. And one of the reasons is because the Republicans were the liberals up until about 50 years ago. I started switching based on a number of things. It gets very hard to, but Republicans pushed through civil rights, and it was Republicans based on a certain set of criteria, specifically also of what defines a republic, where they said, listen, we know this is a democracy. We understand this is a democracy. And in a democracy, if the white majority says, hey, you're a black minority, and we're going to turn you into slaves, and there's nothing you can do about it, they're right. Because it's a democracy, and a democracy is rule of the majority. That's what it is. And the majority vote is more important than anything else. In a republic, the majority vote is important. But what comes first is the rule of law and the enforcement of people's rights. That comes first. Then comes rule really by a sort of a representative democracy. So it was these Republicans that said, oh, listen, I understand some states want to have slaves. I don't care. You cannot do that. The republic comes first, and these are citizens of the republic, and they are human beings, and you cannot, slavery is, boom, that was it. And it's just hilarious because it's if you take a look at what Democrats say their values are now, those are Republican values. Right. Those are, look up what a republic is and what the Republicans held for 150 years. That's what the Democrats are doing. And if you take a look at 80 years ago, do a political map of 80 years ago, all the blue and red states flipped.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
all of them.
Opposite, yeah. Exactly opposite. You could lay it on top of. Yes, I know. I was just looking at it.
So, it's insane. So when you talk about what a conservative, I mean, the conservative, I don't think conservatives say, let's call ourselves conservatives because that's comforting. I think they added compassionate conservatives for that reason. The word compassionate was added for a very specific reason. And it was to combat a very specific perception problem they had. But the I don't think you can say that was a marketing move on them. That is the label that, sort of conservative has. And I was on a stream with a few people about sort of the history of what it means to be conservative and liberal, because these words aren't always understood. Right. Neoliberal economics we've talked about. Well, wait a minute. Neoliberal economics are hardcore in the conservative direction as we understand it. So why is it called neoliberal? Why is it liberal? And there's a huge history to this word, and it becomes very clouded.
It does. I don't know if you watch Bill Maher on Friday nights or whatever it is on Saturday morning.
You don't have kids, do you?
My daughters are 21 and 23.
Okay. Oh, that's why you watch Bill Maher. Okay. Mine are 8 and 10. Yes. So I do get to watch TV. It's great. I enjoy it. Yesterday, Dora and Boots hit a volcano that erupted. Swiper actually got the map, but here was the twist. Okay, so Swiper had the map. Swiper got it. I mean, this was big, but he learned the value of not swiping, and he gave it back to Dora. So nobody wants to talk about that. I've heard there's a show called Game of Thrones that people have been interested in, but I've been on Dora.
Yes, I remember when mine were young. I totally understand. We watch it all.
I used to watch. I watch John Oliver sometimes if I can, when I can fit that in. Bill Maher, yours.
Monday morning is when we watch that. Yeah, on Saturday morning we like to have coffee and a joint and have Bill Maher on in the background while we're reading the paper or whatever. And it was at the beginning of this season or the end of last season when he had done his little beginner monologue at the front, and he had said, neoliberal, what even is neoliberalism? Because he couldn't believe that Nancy Pelosi and his blue dog, beautiful, his people were being called neoliberals. He didn't even know what it meant. And I thought, we have so much fucking work to do, because here is this guy who is a icon. And unfortunately, I don't think this is a good idea for Americans to only get their news from a entertainment show. Unfortunately, many do. Many get their news from him, and then Sunday night from John Oliver, and that's it. And it's so sad.
But there's not a lot you can do about it. Fox News is one of the highest rated shows on television. And, so, they're going to see entertainment. What can you do? Oh, come on. That was a pretty good underhanded dig at Fox.
No, I get it. And Fox is available for anyone. You don't need cable. MSNBC, not that I suggest anyone watch them. You have to. You have to pay for cable to see them. CNN, you have to pay for cable to see them. So
MSNBC is crack for liberals. MSNBC is crack for liberals. And by the way, I will indulge, but it's still, let's not pretend that's not anything but entertainment either.
It is. And I do like to, whenever there's a big story, and I like to, just the other night, I'm like, Stacey, let's see what's on CNN. We did about 20, 30 minutes. Let's see what's on MSNBC. Did about 20, 30 minutes. We did Fox just to have our toe in the water.
Yeah.
And then let's go see what actually happened. And you're just like, fuck my life.
I like watching Fox News. I actually really do, because it's an insight. It is a mind-blowing insight. And Fox and Friends too, on occasion, is just sort of like, and every now and then there's someone who'll do some pushback, and then they get in real trouble what they do. But it's funny because, and I haven't actually, the Codex has been taking up all of my time for the last 4 or 5 weeks now. My daughter's always asked me, Daddy, what did Trump do today? And for the last 4 or 5 weeks, I haven't been able to answer. Usually I've got a pretty good answer, but recently I haven't been able to do it as much as I'd like, but I love being able to get into a debate with someone. And the first thing I do is go to Fox News, and I use them as my primary source, because they actually do especially foxnews.com actually has AP on it. And they do all the AP articles. So you just take it off of foxnews.com, and it's got the Fox News tagline on it. It's Fox News. I say, here you go. It's like, here's my liberal source.
So smart.
And it's, what I don't like is when then liberals jump in and say, how can you possibly quote Fox News and expect anyone to believe it? I was like, they're like, you're discredited, Nick. I was like, first of all, you and I are on the same side. Second of all, it's, oh my God, okay.
Associated Press, who actually, Mac knows there's this whole pyramid of, news sources of where they are on actual. AP's right smack dab at top and in the middle.
AP and Reuters.
Yeah. And Al Jazeera, actually.
My cable company freaked when I asked for that one.
It's actually one of the most legit sources you could go to for international news. Brilliant. Yep. I've been going to Al Jazeera every single day to watch human rights, because Human Rights Watch and a few others that I go to with Al Jazeera, it shows me the outside looking in at us, and it's a totally different look than what we get here.
Last I heard, and I'm sure there's more, but last I heard, only 22 cable companies in the entire country actually carry Al Jazeera by default. And my cable company is owned by my town, by the town I live in. They actually own the electricity and which is kind of cool. So you can call up, but that also means everybody in the town knows what you're doing. And listen, I'd like to get Al Jazeera. I'm like, oh, we've never heard of that. What is that? I was like, I think I may have. And I started doing this 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, so I ask every year. I think we actually finally, no, we didn't get it, but we stream it through the internet. It's long, but at any rate, yeah.
Because it's on YouTube, and that's how I didn't watch any of it.
I mean, if it wasn't for YouTube, I wouldn't even be where I am right now, as far as having access to so many people that think like me, who are I'm talking to Nicholas right now. It's so cool because of this. There's no reason to be ignorant today. So we just have to let people know that, that's the hard part. I've run into people who you just want to be like, wow, I'm never going to get through to them. I can't. It's so frustrating, because I don't know, I think it's my mission to just be patient and keep trying. And it's exhausting sometimes.
I haven't found a way to deal with it. I haven't found a way to give up. And it's funny. It comes from, it's one of my favorite lines actually from War Games. where and obviously it can be vastly misapplied, but where the guy says, there are times when you should just give up. And we've been talking about it. Unfortunately, it's a complicated world. And yeah, there are times when you should just give up. And there are times when your resources can be spent on other things. I haven't learned it well. I really haven't learned it well. I'm actually, I probably shouldn't say this because now I'm going to double my troll count. But I'm reasonably easy to troll because of that. Because what happens is I really want to engage. And I also have a very hard time believing that anyone's disingenuous. I really do. And all my friends have figured it out before I have. They're like, Nick, you're being stupid. This guy isn't. I was like, no, he's serious. I could tell he's serious. No, Nick, you're really being a goddamn idiot. No, I'm serious. And like 3 days later, I think he may not be genuine.
Yeah, I know, but that's the humanist. I don't believe in curses, but for lack of a better way of saying, the humanist curse. I think I really would. I choose. It is a choice to see the good, even if it's just potential of good. And that has gotten me into much heartache. But, I also learned something from it and haven't hardened. I just cry about it. You're a big meanie and I'll never do it again. And then someone needs my help. And I think, well, what if I was in that spot, and I just needed someone who has been there, or even if they haven't, is willing to just listen.
There's no reason to harden. 300,000-400,000 on therapy, you'll be fine.
Hence the Saturday morning in a joint.
Yeah.
Yes. Good stuff. Okay, so I am very interested in this.
Smitty said down in the live chat, Christy has the heart ring from Captain Planet.
Yes.
The heart ring from what?
From Captain Planet.
Oh, God.
Heart.
Mac, Wonder Twin Powers, activate.
I can't believe so we're referencing Ross Perot, war games, movies that have been and then Captain Planet, and everybody in here knew what that meant.
Yes.
Am I the only one who's like really bothered by that? Well, let me rephrase that. I don't mind that you guys knew what it meant. I mind that I knew.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Makes me
pretty
happy.
rad, yeah.
So,
yeah, pretty rad.
So real quick, I'm going to backtrack just a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll close out of this topic, and then we'll just focus on other things. But I did want to, because I brought up quotes.
Yay.
From the that I had seen. And I do want to say that Representative Ilhan Omar has kind of lashed back and called Tucker Carlson. I've tried really hard not to call him Tucker Carlson, and also Tucker Carlson, but I'm sorry. She said that he is a racist fool, and she is calling for people to boycott his show.
Yep.
So, which I think is pretty fair. But some of the things, as I said, that he said, after everything that America has done for Omar and her family, she hates this country more than ever. Which is one thing I do want to focus on. And then the larger quote here. Virtually every public statement she makes accuses Americans of bigotry and racism. This is an immoral country, she says. She has undisguised contempt for the United States and for its people. That should worry you, and not just because Omar is sitting in is now a sitting member of Congress. Ilhan Omar is living proof that the way we practice immigration has become dangerous to this country. A system designed to strengthen America is instead undermining it. So I want to point out, which should be obvious, a lot of this is like white supremacist talking points, like the same kind of stuff you get to where I forget the young man's name, but he just became a big hit on YouTube because he came out and said that he just accidentally slid into the far right white supremacist part of YouTube, and then he's come back over to this side. I
really hate it when that happens.
Yeah, right?
Lipton fell into the KKK.
Oops.
Well, you know what? That happened to me. I was on the I was accidentally surfing YouTube. I hit the man-on-man action. I was gay for a little while, and now I'm.
Yeah, it happens everyone. But
Yeah.
it really overtook his views. It sounds for like a few years, and when you don't fact check and when you don't know things like the things I want to talk about next, it really is a slippery slope. It's easy for a lot of people who don't have time to pay attention to just buy it, hook, line, and sinker. Be like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. She's not one of us, and she's just. Obviously, he's saying it. She's destroying what this country stands for. So, a few of the things that I want to point out is one. We cause a lot of issues in other countries, like Honduras, where a lot of the refugees, like these caravans that we keep hearing about that are coming up to our border, we're the ones who fucked up their government, like royally fucked up their government. And then we wonder why they don't want to stay at home when we propagandize our own country as being the best and greatest on earth. Everyone should want to live here. And then people are like, you know what, you're right, because my country's shit. I don't care who ruined it. I want to come up there.
Right.
Really, we're setting them up to come here. In our quest for conquest, for oil, for money, for profit, and for power. So, Christy, you said you had stats, you had statistics, you have numbers. Is there anything you can lay out here for this part of the segment?
Well, yeah, I do. I have like overall immigration numbers.
Yeah.
Right. I think that a lot of people are very misinformed. There's no other way to say it. They just don't have the right information. They have things that have been told to them. And there's a huge difference. And I even learned something researching all of this, so which is really cool because I love when that happens. The overall immigration numbers continue to grow, but at a much slower rate than before the 2007 to 2009 recession. Immigrants are more likely to be from Asia than from Mexico and are more likely to have a college degree, a bachelor's minimum. The size of the unauthorized population, that's what it's called on MPI, which is called Migration Policy Institute, and it's updated data, all of this, July 10th, 2019. So right now, we're good. They are called unauthorized population, and it appears to be on the decline. Deportations from within the U.S. are rising nonetheless. And on top of these facts, the United States in 2018 resettled the smallest number of refugees since formal creation of the Refugee Resettlement Program in 1980. More than 44.5 million immigrants reside in the USA. And that includes visa holders, legal, illegal, all of it together. 1 in 7 U.S. residents is foreign-born, according to the 2017 American Community Survey, or ACS, data. Immigrants' share of our population is 13.7% of the overall U.S. population, which in 2017, at the end of 2017, was 325.7 million. This still remains below the historical record of 14.8% in 1890. In 1850, the U.S. Census data showed that there were 2.2 million immigrants, representing nearly 10% of the overall population. Between 1860 and 1920, think about 1920, right before the Great Depression, the immigrant share fluctuated between 13 and 15%. That's more than now. Racist and restrictive immigration laws in 1921 and 1924 kept the channels to permanent immigration open almost exclusively to Northern and Western European migrants. Couple that with the Great Depression and World War II, all of this led to a sharp drop in new arrivals from the Eastern Hemisphere. Foreign-born share steadily declined, hitting a record low of 4.7% in 1970. That's only 9.6 million. Important shifts in U.S. immigration law, Immigration Act of 1965 that abolished national origin admission quotas, and the Refugee Act of 1980, as well as the preferential treatment of Cuban migrants over Haitian and all others, the U.S.'s growing economic and military presence in Asia and Latin America, economic ties, powerful immigrant networks, and deep migration history between the U.S. and our southern neighbors, and major economic transformations added to regime change wars, i.e. political instability in countries around the world, all have helped usher in this vast diversification of immigration flows. In 2017, Mexicans accounted for approximately 25% of immigrants in the United States, making them by far the largest foreign-born group. Indian and Chinese were the next two largest groups, each comprising close to 6%, followed by Filipinos at 5%, which I did not know. Rounding out the top 10 were El Salvador, Vietnam, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic, about 3% each. South Korea and Guatemala, 2% each. Together, these countries were the origin of 57% of the U.S. immigration population in 2017.
Real quick, what year was this on these numbers? Which year?
2017.
Okay, sorry.
Sure. In the 1960s, no single country accounted for more than 15% of total immigration population. Italians were the top origin group, making 13% of foreign-born in 1960, followed by Germans and Canadians at 10% each. 21% of the 44.5 million immigrants in the USA in 2017 entered in 2010 or later. 26% arrived between 2000 and 2009. 22% between 1990 and 1999, and 31% before 1990. While immigrants from Mexico dominated the flows post-1970, the makeup of newcomers has changed since the 2007 to 2009 recession. Recently arrived immigrants are more likely to come from Asia and India, and China leading the way. Countries such as the Dominican Republic, the Philippines, Cuba, El Salvador, and Venezuela have also seen sizable immigration to the U.S. By contrast, there were fewer Mexican immigrants in the U.S. in 2017 than in 2010, representing the biggest decline of all immigrant groups in American history. Immigrants and their U.S.-born children now number approximate 89.4 million people, or 28% of the overall American population, according to the 2018 current population survey. Pew Research Center projects that the immigrant origin share will rise to about 36% of the overall population by 2065. 46% of immigrants in 2017 reported their race, this is where we find out who is coming in here, as single race white, 27%, single race Asian as 9%, single race black as 16%, and some other race and people who report more than two races is 2%. 44% of U.S. immigrants, which equals 19.7 million, reported having Hispanic or Latin origins. The majority of U.S. Hispanics are native born. They are not immigrants. Of the 58.8 million people in the majority of U.S. Hispanics are native born. Of the 58.8 million people in 2017 who self-identified as Hispanic or Latino, 34%, which equals 19.7 million, were immigrants, and 66%, 39.1 million, are native born. In 2017, the top 5 U.S. states by number of immigrants were California at 10.7 million, Texas at 4.9 million, New York at 4.5 million, Florida, my state, 4.4 million, and New Jersey at 2.1 million. Immigrants account for 17%, 28 million, of the 163.7 million persons in the civilian labor force in 2017. That's a lot of taxes they're paying. I'm just saying. Between 1970 and 2017, the percentage of the foreign-born in the labor force more than tripled from 5% to 17%. Over the very same period, however, the foreign-born share of the total population grew much more slowly, from less than 5% to just under 14%. And there's so much more stats online, you guys. It's so easy to find. I suggest the Migration Policy Institute. They state their mission statement is to have no political any agenda. It's just the numbers.
Oh, they're going to get hosed.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Thank you for getting all of that.
You're welcome. I love that though. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, we could go a lot of ways with this, but I'm gonna see if we can try and skip like the obvious, like where I mentioned last week, where someone told me, well, America's supposed to be a melting pot, and then what he meant is we're supposed to delude the immigrants.
Right.
I'd like to more or less skip the.
He said he wanted to cook the immigrants.
What?
Yeah, cook the immigrants.
Oh, yeah, I think he meant like when you cook down a roux,
Oh yeah, you boil it until everything's just one thing and nobody knows what's in there anymore.
Evaporated migrants.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and like, he's not even like a Republican. So like that made me pretty sad.
Yeah.
But I'd like to focus more on, well, the point that you pointed out. That's a lot of taxes they're paying, right? Because there's a lot of labor taxes.
I mean, wow. Yeah.
And
income tax, Social Security they're paying into that they will never see a dime of.
Right. They'll never see. They'll never see. And a lot of the arguments that we hear from the right is, one, how are we going to pay for their medical care when they come here and they need help because they made this long, long journey?
Right.
Well, we could pay for it with their taxes. Pay for it with our taxes. We could just do that because that's the humanist thing to do.
Well, like I said earlier, if we as humanists believe it's a human right, immigrants are humans. It's a human right. I'm sorry. Bernie is amazing. It will all be human rights for the rest of my life. Yeah. For the millionaires and the billionaires.
You do that pretty well, actually. That was well done.
You, Christy. So, yeah. Fair point. And I mean, I think for everything else, it all boils down to is how we're going to pay for it. Yeah. And one of the other things I was going to bring up quickly, I didn't want to make a whole topic out of it, is because there's a big fight going on between the progressives, so like 3 or 4 people in the House versus Nancy Pelosi.
Yes.
Because
the squad versus the Blue Dogs.
Yeah, because they didn't vote for this bill that would give more funding to things going on at the border. So like ICE and CBT, or what's the acronym I'm looking for? Border Patrol.
Yeah.
they they didn't want to vote yes for this bill, and I understand why. And if everyone else doesn't, or if anyone else doesn't, let me point it out to you very, very, very easily and quickly. If someone's doing an awful job, and they don't need money to do a better job, then you don't throw more money at them, right? You don't give ICE a few million more dollars without them promising they're going to fix shit, because they wouldn't make any promises to make any solid changes to change what's going on down at
well, I mean, we can go over the facts.
more money, because that will help it.
Right. It's not going to. And the facts that we know are that there are 1,200 open beds right now that are at government-funded facilities that have adequate staff, that they are ready for children and families. That's what they do. But that's going to not help create a crisis. That's not going to keep them all shoved in houses at the border. I watched the hearings 2 days in a row, yesterday and today, and I couldn't even hold it together listening to Ali talking. Oh, it was just heartbreaking. But one of the things that I keep hearing while you're saying they need more money and why they didn't vote for it and why I stand for them not voting for it, they asked Border Patrol agents face to face, what do you think should be done? You're here every day. And all of them that they talked to said, don't send more money. I wasn't trained for this. This is not, I need to be at the border.
Well, that's the problem. And the thing you had said earlier, and I was going to interject when you said earlier that they're not doing a good job. Well, it's hard to say whether or not they're doing a good job. Yeah. They're doing a very bad job, but they're doing what they weren't hired to do and what they weren't trained to do. So
they're not social workers.
Yeah, you can't sit there and say they're doing a bad job as if it's their fault. They're doing a bad job because they were hired to do A, B, C, and they're doing X, Y, Z. So, and whatever objections you have to what's going on or how it's being handled, which is really quite poorly, even just with the boots on the ground at that level, that's not their job.
Right.
No, these facilities are set up for intake of like an hour or two. You come in, you get some water, you can wash your hands, you get maybe a snack, but there's no kitchen, there's no showers. It's just let's get who's your paperwork. We can let whoever know where you need to go to this facility or this facility. That's what it's for. And they have, instead of the 200 maximum, they have 500 children because this policy of it's illegal to cross makes them already have a charge. So if you come across and say, I'm coming straight to you, it doesn't matter how I got here, per the law, I'm coming straight to you. Please, I want to apply for asylum. Well, under this new policy, that's a charge. That's illegal. So under our law, if you have a charge, you can't be a citizen.
It challenges your asylum claim too. So now all of a sudden, and it's much easier to deport you. And if you want to sit there and say, until this started, most of them were applying for asylum at an embassy. They were following the proper procedure. And even to date, most of the quote illegal immigrants, which, another topic, most of them are ones who overstayed their visas. They're ones who overstayed their visas. So if you want to stop the problem, listen, we could put up a 6,000 mile high wall that, Trump can put his name on top of and, he's going to be really thrilled about. But that's actually not going to stop the bulk of the problem. It looks good. It's great for you want to get people all riled up about it, but it's not going to stop the problem. And actually, it's going to hurt the ones. Unfortunately, the ones who overstay their visas and stuff like that are usually the ones who need the asylum least of the ones who are really trying to get it. They all need it. I don't want to sit there and say that, oh my God, if you overstay your visa, you didn't have. But the people who are getting shot at by drug dealers or who are told by the police in their town, if you stick around here, we will kill you. Those people kind of need to go somewhere.
Yes, they do.
And in some cases, they can stay somewhere else in Mexico, but that's actually a reasonably rare situation for a lot of reasons. And they come to the border. Then what happens is he closes the embassies for, I think he closed 4 days a week or something like that. And then So even under a normal load, the line goes back 3, 4, 5 days. So there's this huge line. So you sit there and say, okay, do I have enough food and water to stay and apply the proper way, or do I try to save my life another way? And those are some reasonably difficult choices. And I don't necessarily think that, and if I recall, I could be wrong, it's actually it's not a felony to try to cross illegally. It's a misdemeanor.
Yeah,
so
it's a very low misdemeanor. It's like if you didn't pay your parking ticket.
Yeah, so let's make sure they get shot and killed for committing a misdemeanor. I think that's proportionate. That's a good call. And by the way, I'll say, just to jump into one other thing. I've got no problems, no problems with. I shouldn't say no problems, but for hyperbole, I'm saying I've got no problems with saying if we can't afford it, we have to keep immigrants out if we can't afford it. I really got no problem with that, because we do have our own responsibilities here. The thing is, we pay more in our military than every other country in the world combined. All of them combined. Add China, Russia, add the UK, add all the NATO countries who are allies of ours. So if we get into trouble, their military is on our side. The top 28, 26 are allies. And you add all of those up and we beat them all. So I have a very hard time. And speaking of agencies that say send us less money, the Pentagon has said send us less money. They have said send us less money repeatedly. And every study that's gone into it says they really need less money, because they've also ballooned to the point where they're losing significant efficiency. Things are getting very difficult over there. And they're producing things. They're building new weapon systems they don't want to build and don't want to need. They need more precise weapon systems that can do specific things, instead of catch-all airplanes that can do a million things sort of kind of well and can't do a single thing well at all, and is unreliable because it crashes every time it tries to.
Are you talking about the invisible ones?
I was thinking of 3 simultaneously as I was telling that story.
Oh, sorry.
But, really funny. So they're saying we don't need the money, and one of the reasons, and this is the thing that just always gets me, is when conservatives talk about social programs, and they don't like people saying they want the hand of the market to make the choices, and they don't. Keeping jobs is not a reason to keep a plant here or there, or to help a business out, or has nothing to do with it. But it always seems to be a reason to keep a military base. Yeah. It always seems, if you're talking about closing a military base, if you literally are able to remove every other objection, it comes down to jobs. And I really want to know why on the other side of the aisle, the jobs can't be considered, but on that side of the aisle, it's paramount. And they say they're against big government. They've created the largest bureaucracy in the history of humankind.
Of ever. Yeah. Right. It's just.
They're not against big government. They're against what the Dems want for government. They love big government.
Yes, they do.
And that gets back to controlling the language.
They want it so big that it goes all up in my uterus.
That's wow. That's
money for that.
Talk about government overreach.
They want big and deep government.
Wow. Okay, I'm sorry. I was expecting the Distinguished League, or the League of Distinguished. I think I may be on the wrong. Is this Pornhub? How did I get here? I'm not sure. I have clearly clicked on the wrong button.
You shouldn't just click on random links.
Yeah, well, and as soon as I said I clicked on the wrong button, I was about to take that somewhere where it really shouldn't go. But let's just move forward. So
apparently you're in the right place.
I think I am. I think I probably did, in fact, end up in the right spot. So, oh God, I can't believe I just said that. Okay, I just have to stop talking, because I think my mind is not where it's supposed to be for this discussion.
From where that's crazy.
So we were the economics. We can afford it, and here's the other thing, which is the evidence that I've seen, everything I've taken a look at, says that in the first generation they are a drain on the economy. They are a drain on the economy. Thank you very much. So if that's what you want to talk about, and you want to limit your scope to that, you are absolutely right. The problem is that the next generation ends up just kicking fucking ass. They get PhDs. They go build things. They join the military. They do and they excel at it. And the reason is because their parents say, this is the country that saved your mother's life and allowed you to be born. And don't you ever forget it. And it's been my experience, and every study I've read bears this out, but just my personal experience, that when I meet the children of immigrants, they love this country more than just about anybody I've ever met.
Yes,
I mean, they just love it. And yes, they know more. They're more committed to it. Yes. They are more willing to die for it. Yes. They are. And then I'm sitting here going, and I understand actually that may also be part of the fear, because it's all of a sudden it's like, well, is this really my America if somebody else loves it more? Well, the thing is, yeah, because you're really the children of immigrants too. So
we all are, all of us.
And it's the ideals.
Indigenous.
Do you want the ideals?
Yeah.
Are you in love with the American ideals? In which case, it doesn't matter the skin color of the people who hold those ideals, and it doesn't matter where they come from. Are you in love with the ideals, or are you in love with the race and the sort of the perception you have that's either this, leave it to be? Which is it? When you say you love America, which is it? And that's where it gets into. But I can't fathom for the founding fathers it was anything other than the ideals. So if you're going to sit here and lecture to me about the founding fathers, I think you got a problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, out of doing this research, one of the things that I found that I didn't know was on a between the ages of 25 and 35 of immigrants, not native born, just got here. That same age group of native born Americans, their group has like 32.6% college educated, and we have like 30.1 something of that same group. There are, I know that we took 2 Syrians. I know that for a fact. I couldn't find anything else. 2 Syrians. Most of them, what I did find on that article was doctors and lawyers and various established people that were fleeing war. But they know by coming here, that doctor degree doesn't mean squat. They have to start at the bottom again.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
All of that, but they're willing. One of the immigrants that talked to AOC told her that, or maybe it was in the hearing. The hearing is all smushed together today. Said that they would rather die in the United States than get deported. That's how bad it is. I think taking the human away from them is really detrimental to this country's psyche. Trump this week saying they're not human, they're animals.
Oh, Jesus.
Put a lot of fear in me. And he doesn't, normally I'm like, oh, he's a buffoon. But that's, if you look at them like animals, then, I mean, what's the big deal of shooting them? Like but patrol officer who shot across the border at that 15-year-old and shot him 10 times in his back. That family has no recourse. There's no way, because he got not guilty.
Yeah.
And they have no way to put an end to this in there. But if it was reversed, we could go after the family. How about that? That really sits wrong with me. And if it doesn't sit wrong with you, you might be the problem.
Right. And it's just another example of American exceptionalism, right? Like, we can do no wrong, but if you do wrong to us,
because we're right.
You will hear.
Yeah.
Right.
Like God. If God kills people, it was the right thing to do.
Right. It was all fine.
If he kills people, it was we're Yahweh. We're the nation of Yahweh.
And I'm sorry to say this, but that's what killed the British Empire. And I remember reading, oh my God, I forget who it was. It's a classical British writer. By classical, I mean sort of, he's modern, but everybody's sort of not Noam Chomsky or anything. Chomsky's American, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, what a big. He had said, listen, we fucked up. We owned most of the world, and we were an empire, and we could do anything we wanted, and we totally screwed it up. We let our egos get in the way. We thought that we didn't earn it through a lot of hard work and blood, sweat, and tears, and we thought it didn't cost anything. We just thought we owned it because we deserved it and we're born into it. And if you don't like it, there's nothing you can do, and we lost it. Said now it belongs to the U.S. First of all, you can have it. We don't want the responsibility anymore. but let's watch and see if you're any better and you can do anything with it. And I remember watching that. And I said, I really wish I could. Actually, I remember saying to a conservative friend of mine, I said, no, I don't think we are. He's like, oh, you hate America. And which is the other, that gets into, because I wanted to talk about language, 1984 and all these other things, but there's no way we'll touch on any of it. But so one of the things, I'm sitting there going, and I'm watching that's what we're doing. And this is how Rome fell apart. It overextended its military. And it made its military the central, focus of its economy. And the problem is, then you have to either use it or they get bored and they come back and everything just falls apart. If you have a military, you must be using it in one way or another, or you're going to be in real trouble. And if that's what happened to Rome, it's essentially what happened to the Brits. And it's happening now. And it's sort of like, I feel like shouting this at the rooftops, and it's not going to do any good. So,
that whole thing, I think about that. I've never put it into words. That I think about how Holland did imperial bullshit. They had, countries and slaves, and so did many of these other older nations who today are, very social democracy. All of these, they have amazing healthcare. They have good education. Do you think, or is this an opinion of yours, that it's because we're so young and that is in our future? Maybe they were able to let go of it. I do know a lot of American history, a lot of world history. I know that World War II had a lot to do with divvying up the properties. However, was it because it was just time and they had learned their lesson? I mean, a lot of them have implemented actual factual history into their schools. Like, these are the things we did wrong.
Yeah.
And why we don't want to do them again. Look at America. It's, I think of that a lot. I'd have never really put it into words.
Yeah.
I think,
go ahead, Nick.
I think education's a silver bullet. I think education's the silver bullet on that one. I think having an open and honest dialogue is also part of that silver bullet. That's why being allowed to have that open and honest dialogue is not only in the Constitution, but it's actually in the First Amendment. And I don't think that was stupid. And I think when people use language like racist, which gets used by my side a lot on other people, when the other side calls my side unpatriotic, I think that language is designed to stop ideas that you just simply disagree with. And you may be right, you may be wrong. There's no way of finding out now, because what you're trying to do is to kill the dialogue rather than win in a free marketplace of ideas, which was supposed to be the point. Rather than allow your ideas to compete on that level, what you are trying to do is to silence the other side. And don't get me wrong, I am a pro free speech. I'm for that, but this isn't to say all ideas are equal. And this is, but the only way to find out is to have that dialogue. And I think we are at a point where that very fundamental concept, which you would think, especially conservatives, to get back to what Gray had said earlier. People who presumably believe in the Constitution. And again, when we talk about the Second Amendment, there is an amendment that comes before it. There really is. And there's a reason it comes before it. And the idea that they're now really saying, we really don't want to hear from liberals, and liberals are saying we don't want to hear from conservatives, or won't watch Fox News, or who won't. And I think until we become more willing to engage and we make education a priority, we will not be able to examine ourselves sufficiently to prevent this from happening and to prevent. And what I think it was in all of those prior cases, it was ego. It was this: I am an American. I was born an American. That makes me better than you. My country has 95% of all the military bases, foreign military bases, for a reason. And it's because I'm just inherently better. And even if they don't say that, and even if they say that's not what they mean, that's what they're thinking. And the way is because that's what they're projecting, because that's what we are as a country are projecting. We don't listen. Friends told us, don't invade Iraq. Very good friends, like France.
Yes.
Friends who people are saying, they're going, I hate the French. What'd they ever do for us? Only And then there was so much. I was like, only help found the country without which there would be no United States. By the way, do you enjoy the Statue of Liberty, which was a gift from the French?
Yep. When we needed them, we didn't even have to ask. When they needed us, we were like, la la la.
Yeah, we did. We're like, did you send a message? My DMs were down, man. Twitter is. I didn't. What did you?
Yep.
And they tell us, and we say, no, we know better than you. We know better than everybody else. We are going to go with Palau, and we're going to go invade. Yeah.
Stupid Americans.
Oh, no, and Palau was like, we believe you. We want to be with the Americans. And we're like, now we're a thing because, and it's sort of like this, and this is an example. We're going to make mistakes no matter what we do. We really are. And pooling ideas together isn't a guarantee of getting the best ideas, but it is over time the best way to get the best ideas. And we are sabotaging that deliberately in many cases because there are short-term gains to do that. And that's one of the things. We are hardwired to have a very difficult time investing in making long-term investments. We tend to prefer short-term gains, and that's politicians in particular do that. That's what caused the entire 2007 meltdown. If you take a look at the engine of that was, I know that this is going to kill the our earnings in 3 years, but I can bail out with my golden parachute and yada yada yada, and that's sort of how we think about things. And I think the countries that no longer do that, the only reason is because they got kicked in the teeth real hard by history, and they've learned. And so long as they have that cultural memory, they won't do it. Over 200 years, they will lose that memory, and they will do it again, unfortunately. So it's a question of, can we really figure out ways to institutionalize? I was going to say being educated, and I always get blowback by that because, like, okay, you're an elitist because you want everyone to have an education. I don't think understanding how and why we do things that really fuck up so that we can avoid doing it again, I don't think that's elitism. But if I say
on society, right?
Yeah.
Christy?
I don't know. I can't say it. Anyway,
you're not talking to your cat, are you?
No, my girlfriend's over there.
Well, I mean, that's perfect. Actually, it's perfectly fine. I don't mind it. If your cat's talking back, then I think there's a problem. But yeah.
So I want to say a few things, and I guess more or less kind of sum it up because I don't need to say a lot more. You've had wonderful things, but you did kind of glaze over the fact that you don't pick where you're born, right? If you're born here, you feel like this is your country, right?
Yeah, nationalism is dumb.
But that doesn't mean, nationalism is dumb. I'm getting at that. But,
Christy, please stop interrupting him. Please go ahead.
Shut up, Christy. Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome.
Just
stop interrupting him.
I'm dying. All right.
Let him talk.
You don't get to pick where you're born. That being said, if you get to come here, again, as Nick said, you usually love this country, right? You if you're trying to come here, you usually want to be here, and you probably do really appreciate all the opportunities that you have when you get here. But that doesn't mean that you don't want to make this country better. That doesn't mean you don't see its flaws. That doesn't mean you don't want to fix the flaws that you see. I've lived in this country all my life. I haven't even been out of this country. I've been off the coast a little bit, but I'm still in American waters. I see flaws in this country. That doesn't mean that I don't like America, that I don't like our nation. That just means I want to make it better, and I have my own thoughts and my own goals to make it better. And this is kind of what makes me sick a little bit. This kind of makes me hate just nationalism. It kind of makes me hate national pride a lot of times. And I've said it a few times before. Is that mindset which is America.
Yeah.
Wrong. It's It's the exceptionalism.
Mm.
It is the Confederate truck. It is. We need to flex our muscles, or else Iran's not going to know that we're serious, or we're going to look weak. We spend so goddamn much. We spend more than the next 7 countries on our military, right? And our military isn't our country. You don't have to just support everything that our military does to support our country. You don't need to support every little thing that we do. You don't need to support half the things that we do to love our country. Oh, hello, cat.
She's got an opinion. Wow.
She does. It was IIUYY.
I've never heard such racist things coming from a cat, and I think you need to talk to her because that.
You bad kitty. Yes, I don't think that nationalism is healthy, and why should we be like, well, we chose capitalism and I guess we got it, and like on any system, no matter what it is, it will always evolve and it should always change. We should always want to do better.
That's what our founding fathers wanted, right?
That's why it was so ambiguous.
System that we could mold along the way.
Yes.
So we should do that. And people should.
I don't even think they saw this many people and cell phones. They didn't even imagine that. So it just goes to show you that the brilliance of being able to write a document that could be so relevant today.
Right.
That the ideas of this country make me very proud that I was lucky enough to be born here. Nothing I did, nothing inherent like, well, I'm better because I'm American. I was fortunate to belong to a family.
This was forced upon you.
Right. It was kind of just luck, like it is with anyone. So if you take that same thinking, it could be luck that you were born in El Salvador and your mom was shot and your dad's part of a gang and you and your brother have to leave because if you don't join the gang tomorrow, they're going to rape your sister in front of you. Like, that's not their fault. I don't know. That's how I see it. And I know not every story is like that. And not all asylum seekers have a story that is going to pass all of our rigorous testing. However, I feel that every single asylum seeker, if they say they need asylum, by law, they should be given the chance to plead.
Right.
Well, but by the Geneva Conventions, excuse me, it's international law. We've all kind of agreed to this, but we've already made it really crystal clear that the Geneva Conventions no longer apply. I mean, we've waterboarding. That's done. We now reasonably routinely violate the Geneva Conventions anyway.
We have veto power at the IMF, so we have veto power at UN. Poor Iran wants to show the UN we have all this evidence and we blocked it from even being.
We weren't going to let them in.
Even look at it.
There's only one major economic powerhouse where it looks like we don't have veto power, and we actually kind of do. That's OPEC.
Really?
We don't have power. We don't have veto power in OPEC because we're not an OPEC country. But
she's writing it down.
Iraq is an OPEC country, and so is Saudi Arabia. And I may be wrong, but that may be why we give Saudi Arabia, we make weapons deals with the Royal House of Saud, a absolutely brutal dictatorship, worse than Saddam Hussein ever was. Why, significantly, we go there, we pal around with them, and in exchange, we get the cheapest oil prices on the planet. And they do raise them on occasion. We always make a show of, oh my God, you treat us so poorly. But in the end, every time we want it down, guess who exercises veto power on our behalf? Royal House of Saud. Guess which major Middle Eastern country is sort of always on the verge of having a revolution and getting kicked out? Royal House of Saud, Saudi Arabia. What happens if that happens? We lose veto power. So what happens then? All of a sudden, we start looking at Iraq and say, ooh, we kind of need to go into Iraq and liberate these people for no other reason than we're Christians and because we love freedom and the fact that they've got veto power too.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, complete side tangent, but it gets back to economics. It gets back to, the other one, and I probably cut somebody off, so I apologize, but
it's so relevant. It's so relevant. They're not only a dictatorship, they're a theocracy. They crucify people and behead people for protesting and pro-democracy protest. Like, that's this government's BFF.
It is.
And we had talked about this. If you really want to stop, there's actually not a very hard way to stop illegal immigrants coming into this country. And that way helps us too. It's called free trade. And it's really hilarious because the conservatives say they're for free trade and they keep going against free trade. If we have free trade with Mexico, we're going to lose a lot of jobs, but they're in certain sectors and we're going to gain jobs in other sectors. And the net is going to be a net positive. Free trade is one of the only economic games, and the economy talks about games, and I think everybody here knows what I mean when I say that. It's one of the only ones that's not a zero-sum game. Both sides benefit in free trade. Now, that's sort of a conceptual thing. There are kind of exceptions, and you get into complicated but for the most part, just as a base starting model, free trade is the only economic game that is a non-zero-sum game. So when we trade with Mexico, it helps them, it helps us. And if their economy gets better, and ours does too, in the same time, fewer people, first of all, it's going to be much, if the government can stabilize itself, if the military can stabilize itself, the police force can stabilize itself. If it can do that, the crime rate's going to go down. If the crime rate's going to go down, even if they're not as good as us, people still aren't going to say, well, I'm going to leave my country the people who are leaving are desperate. They're terrified. If Mexico gets better, that stops. Our economy gets better too because we get cheaper products. And I hate to say it's the same thing with China. And the fact that I'm the bleeding heart liberal arguing for a conservative position that they have forgotten, and I usually get shot at by conservatives for even suggesting it. And I was like, you do realize this is your position, not mine.
Right.
Oh, my God.
Free trade because they know the majority of the citizens, and I'm not calling them dumb. I think that there are plenty of people that just don't know or know how to know. They use free trade as kind of like the code word for their crony capitalism is what it is. It's not free trade. They don't want fair for all.
I'm going to interrupt. I'm going to speak to a comment in the live chat, if I may.
Yeah, go for it.
But this comment came from somebody called Smitty. And I need to talk about Smitty for a second. Smitty's my man. Smitty is totally... everybody loves Smitty. Now, I'd like to go see more of him in other channels, and he mods in a couple of places. So what I'm thinking is the easiest way is to just tell me what channels on YouTube he doesn't mod on, and I can afford those because that's going to be a much shorter list. But so he had said cheaper products ain't worth shit if you don't have a job. That's a fair point. That's an absolutely fair point. But free trade increases the number of jobs. So it changes where the jobs go. But here's the thing. You see a lot of, you're going to see that no matter what you do, and it's always happening, and we're always fighting it. And what we need to do is find a way to integrate and understand that and help people through the transition process or to get jobs. Or we need to make actually also job placement a priority in this country, which we haven't. Everybody's kind of on their own, and that's why we suffer these problems. The countries that deal with job placement and who take that seriously, yes, I know it's a social service. I'm sorry. I know I'm expanding more in the government.
I love it. I love social services. They're beneficial.
The Netherlands has a 50% tax rate. I think you and I had to discuss this, right? The Netherlands has a 50% tax rate, but because they have these kinds of services, in the end, you actually have more money in your pocket because your healthcare is taken care of. All the things that we have to pay for here, you don't have to pay for. Once the expenses are accounted for, you actually have more money. But what we need to do is, and it comes back to what Trump said about the coal jobs. So Trump said to the coal miners, your jobs are coming back and so on and so forth. I think he actually believed it when he said it. I do. But
I think he believes every single thing he says.
That's actually probably true too. Even when when he says like an apple is an orange, I'm sure he may well believe that.
I don't think he's eaten either.
It might be a type of orange. I'm actually not wrong.
Is it has seeds in it?
Like McDonald's, the hamburger buns,
Did you see that? Did you see when he had all the teams and stuff at the White House this past year? He had trays and trays and trays of fast food, like a whole bunch of double cheeseburgers, a whole bunch of hamburgers, a whole bunch of Big Macs. I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing because the whole fucking world was watching.
Well, I really kind of just like whenever he's on TV, I just kind of hope the rest of the world is turning off their TVs, and most of the time I'm right. So, when he got mocked at the UN, I was just like, okay, I think it's just.
I didn't know I was gonna get that reaction.
I didn't know, and then he said they were laughing with me. I was like, no, they were really quick. You hadn't made a joke. Well, I mean, you stood up, which is kind of a joke, but you're in front of the UN, which is a joke. But that wasn't the. Oh my God.
Yeah, what did he say? He said, I have achieved more in my first than any other president in the history, and the United Nations was like.
It's and like fact checking, so what I read the next day was like 300 fact checkers just dropped dead. Like there's no more, like machines were exploding everywhere. Have you ever seen that? There's that Simpsons episode where Professor Fink has that machine. He goes, I have this machine here that will let me detect sarcasm. And he's got the little machine. The guy goes, oh, a sarcasm detector. That's so useful. And the machine just goes poof. I think what Trump said, I've accomplished more than. Yeah, I think that was it. A lot of fact checkers just said I could have a heart attack, or I could fact check Trump, and I think I'm going to take the easy way out.
I mean, because he's on record saying that if something doesn't go his way, or if the facts line up against him, he will lie until he gets his way. He'll scream and shout and he'll pout and he'll lie until he gets his way.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen with. I haven't been following it, but I'm really curious to see. They've denied him now. What was the war? He's war with Iran. So he's doing something with Iran, and the Congress just overrode him. Well, not technically there wasn't an override, but they're now blocking him. What was that? I didn't like.
Yeah.
You guys are the news experts.
Yeah, he wanted to drop a bomb on a part of Iran that wouldn't hurt anybody. And to kind of, it was directly after our spy drone got shot down in their area. Then he wanted to do a retaliation for something that they didn't do. I don't.
Yeah, no. Well, the number of problems with that is so staggering. We have violated our agreement with them. We've absolutely violated our agreement with them. You can sit there and say that they violated the agreement, and you can sit there and trump out Ariel Sharon, and have him say we have all this evidence. All that evidence we already had when we made the deal, and we knew, and they stopped doing it. And every intelligence service on the planet said that these guys are doing it. And this gets back to also, okay, when we screw over South American and Latin American countries, when we screw over, or Middle American countries, when we screw over Middle Eastern countries, because it's a little hard to get to the U.S., by dinghy from crossing the Atlantic, we have less of a problem there. But other countries have a problem there. And what happens is when we cause wars in those countries, they get huge refugees going into Europe, and Europe, a lot of people suffer with that, and we really just don't care about the consequences. And I'm actually going to be reasonably frank about that. I know I'm going to get some pushback by people saying the conservatives, they care. No, I really don't think they do, because if they did, they'd sit there and they'd think about these consequences just a bit more, and they seem not to. So if they care, I would love to be proven wrong on that. But
they don't act like it, right?
Yeah.
And the thing with Iran right now is, like you said, we backed out of that deal. We went back on our word. We backed out of that deal a year and a half ago. And the only thing I'm hearing on like CNN and MSNBC right now, right, like this past week, is all right, so Iran is now going to enrich
Uranium.
uranium. Yeah. They're going to do it. We backed out of this, this is a year after we backed out of the Iran whatever pact, and now they're going back on their word, or they're breaking the deal or whatever. Like, no, they're not breaking the deal when it's already
There's no deal. There's no deal.
There's no deal. They were
Right.
trying to keep it with Europe, and then it looks like they might be backing us up when we stopped their oil tankers. So they're like, all right, well then we're going to have to enrich uranium because we need to do something, and we need to make money, and we need to. Well, they want nuclear power, like so they can have actual power, right? So they're going to enrich uranium to 5% or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
From 3.5, what they were allowed per our agreement, to
Yes.
5
5%.
for their power. That's it. However, there's no money in that for our team. So it would be better if they didn't do that and only could get their enriched uranium from us. But since they want to be independent and they want to drop the petrodollar, that creates significant problems in the
It creates a hole in our
you have to look through it through the lens of an empire. You have to.
Yeah.
It's the only way that it'll make sense, because otherwise you're like, why the fuck are we doing this?
Right, because it creates a hole in our pocket, but it really doesn't, because we don't own anything over there,
No.
right?
Well, and they buy they love American products. They love American products. It's a reasonably small market. It will grow. I just, oh my God, it's again, it's short-term thinking. It's global stability. Well, first of all, free trade helps global stability. Global stability helps everybody. It's one of those things. The more we can cause stability there, the less likely. And that's the argument. That's the funny thing is that's the argument that people are using on why we should have all these military bases, is because it creates stability. Well, it sort of does, but it's a lot of investment into something. Yeah, that's really, and it doesn't in the long term, because we actually need to be able to be checked too. There's a reason for checks and balances, and we believe in checks and balances, except when it comes to the global stage and anyone saying, no, America, you're wrong. Then all of a sudden we don't believe in checks and balances anymore. And I don't think it would necessarily hurt us to reduce even our own ability to act completely unilaterally anytime we want to. And again, fundamentally, that's kind of what did in Rome, and that's what did in the UK. And if we can sit there and help other countries, it's not I write, and I've taught a writing class for 10 years, and one of the things I find is every writer really kind of guards their work, and B, never wants to help other writers. It's very hard to find someone who wants to help another writer. And that's one of the reasons I did this, was because I was helped by a writer. So I was like, I have to pay it forward. I have to help others. And the reason is because they seem to think that every time somebody publishes a book, that means it's one fewer person's going to read your book. They think it's a zero-sum game, and that other writer, you're going to be in competition with other writers. Is there some truth to that? Maybe on some level, but if people see more than one movie at the movie theaters. People read more than one book. People and really, when there's a richer culture for people to draw from, it's going to help you too. And I think it's the same thing where we think, okay, if there's another country that's got success somewhere, that necessarily takes out of our pockets, that we are necessarily in competition with every successful country. That's just not true. Right. So, but I think I think we have that in our heads, and I think we're sort of stuck on that. But
yeah. I mean, that's kind of what we're raised to know, and that's how we are raised to believe that's how we become successful, right? Anyone can make it to be a capitalist. Mm-hmm. But I do want to say real quick, Robert X threw in his 2 cents in the live chat here. We were talking about, I think it was the Netherlands. You said they have a 50% tax rate. Is that right, Nick?
I think it's about. Well, actually, I had said the Netherlands. That is correct. I was thinking of Scandinavian countries, and the company I was actually thinking of was Sweden. Now, that may or may not be true. I meant to say Sweden. I said the Netherlands because I'm stuck in.
I think it is, but it's like 50 million and $1 and up.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't. Well, it's a graduated tax, so the 50% tax rate isn't universal across the board. But that's sort of the base sort of average tax rate is about 50%. Our average tax rate is about 15%. Now, a lot of people pay a great deal more than that. I pay more than 15%. Mitt Romney paid 13.4%. That's what he pays as a tax rate.
Millionaire.
So, no, and I got that one wrong too. No, our average tax rate, I think, is about 21 to 22%. But what I meant sort of was the average. They don't have a flat tax. I wasn't trying to say they've got a flat tax. What I'm just trying to say is if you're a citizen there, you're paying about 50% in taxes. That's right. What you're paying. Here in the U.S., it's 21 to 23% is what you're paying on average. There are people who are paying none. There are people who are paying more. People who are paying less.
Right. And he had said that it was, just past a certain point. And I don't think you were saying it was a flat tax myself, but just
I got it.
And I wanted to point out because Nacho caught it in the chat, and also he went through the trouble, and I'm going to repost it here right now in the live chat. He went through the tax brackets for us, and
good,
which was very, very kind of him to do. So I
very nice.
Robert X, thank you for pointing that out and putting the specifics. That's amazing. So we try to keep this around an hour and a half, so people still want to click on it to watch it. But I do want to get to what our main topic was.
No, I was reading. Okay, I saw 48% somewhere in Sweden. 70% is the hot, but the average is about 48% is what I'm reading. So, but anyways, please continue.
I love percentages. I don't know why.
I was just going to say
86% of people do.
If you can tell us about the Humanist Codex a little bit, if you can talk about your book, maybe let us know about the Atheist Codex, why it changed. So if you can just give us a little bit of insight on what your book is about and
Sure.
what your views are over the next 10-15 minutes, then we'll probably go and wrap it up.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, I have many different fingers and many different pies and other kinds of fruit.
Crazy.
I know. I'm a writer. I have 2 books. This one is The Water Thief. And it's funny because after I did this, there's like 6 other water thieves now. There was one called The Water Thief before, but now there's like 6 others. This came out in, 2012. What happened was so my degrees are in philosophy and psychology. BA level degrees. I'm not, I don't have anything advanced in there, but I take especially the philosophy very seriously. I stopped for about 10 or 15 years, but now I'm all of a sudden on shows like Ask a Philosopher, so I'm doing all that again, which I'm actually quite pleased to be doing. But a friend of mine said, "Okay, you're into philosophy. What do you think of Ayn Rand?" And I said, "Well, I haven't really read Ayn Rand." And he said, "Well, she's right about everything she says, and I want you to, read it because I know you got an open mind and deal with it." So I read Atlas Shrugged, and I agreed with about 99% of everything I read. But I somehow said, I still think this is wrong, and I don't get how or why. And again, to a philosopher, that's not an acceptable answer. You have to think about it, and you have to come up with an answer. You can't just sit there and say, "I disagree." There has to be. So I sat and I thought about it for a while, and I finally figured out how and why. But I said, rather than write a paper or an essay, I would write another novel, and it would be a counter to her novel, and it would mirror that book. And so it would work with it. It also is about 1980. It has references to 1984, so on and so forth. It's and if you look at some of the reviews of it, it was a commercial flop. I mean, it didn't. I didn't make millions of dollars off of the thing, but it was a critical success. I mean, it got Clarion silver for science fiction for the year, and book of the year. It made bronze. Kirkus got a Kirkus star, made best of 2012. what's that? Finalist for another Clarion. So it got a lot of ones. Midwest Book Review said required reading for any who question for any who question authority in our culture, and that it should be required reading in every high school in the country. So getting that from the Midwest Book Review, I was thrilled. So I like to talk economics and bore people with it. The book is that's it. You don't have to be into economics to enjoy it, although it is a little heavy on the economics, and that's sort of its biggest complaint. But a lot of people still really like it, and it's doing well on Amazon. I co-wrote Confessions of a Sin Eater, which is the true biography of a prison psychologist at Walpole Super Maximum Security facility in Massachusetts. That is a brutal book, and I do not recommend it for most people. Listen, my wife has read everything I've ever written except that, and I completely stand by that decision. He was a therapist to the worst human beings you can possibly imagine, and one of the difficulties, there are many things that I find interesting about it from a psychological perspective, and when we talk about prison reform and stuff like that, all of which are great topics that I very much enjoy talking about. But for him, and one of the main themes in this is what happens to the psychologist? Because as a psychologist, you have to connect to your patient. If you cannot do that, you cannot help them. They will not trust you if you cannot do that. And if they don't trust you, you cannot help them. How do you connect to someone who butchered his family? What happens to you when you connect to that person? What ethical responsibilities do you have? But it's all told through stories. I mean, it's just his stories. They are utterly insane, but they're what you'd expect at the thing. So, so he and I co-wrote that one together, and I'm very proud of that one. And then I wanted to get back into philosophy. I bought on the same day two, and if you go to my YouTube channel, Nicholas Lamar Soutter, so it's YouTube /C Nicholas Lamar Soutter. I've got a title thing, but I did a Trump rant, which I go a little, I lose it on Trump, and I did a gun rant, and I bought two domain names, the Gun Control Codex and the Atheist Codex on the same day, and I decided I was going to build one and then maybe build two. And I was sort of on a flip of a coin. I went on atheism, and I have to tell you, every time there's a school shooting, I do wonder if I made the right choice. I had come up with the book, The Water Thief. I came up with an argument and sort of a way of looking at Ayn Rand that people hadn't done before. And that's why I wrote the book on it. And I think that's why the book worked. And I think that's how I was able to explain it. I was able to do the same thing with gun control. And I was able to do the same things, in my opinion, with anti-theism. And I said, which am I going to do first and how am I going to do it? I started with anti-theism. So I did the Atheist Codex. But one of the things I found was that a lot of the atheist community was really nice, but I was looking at what they were doing to theists, and I'm sitting there going, and they're like, "Oh, you're an idiot for believing in God." Nobody's an idiot for believing in God. What do you? Excuse me. Oh well, I'm just mocking their beliefs. I'm not mocking them. Oh yeah, and they're just hating the sin, not the sinner.
Same.
give me a hypocrisy much. And what would happen is I would engage. I ended up, first of all, engaging more atheists and saying, "Dude, chillax." And one of the reasons is because I'm like, when you screw this up, you're entrenching them. You're making them want to stick to, because I got to tell you, if I thought my beliefs might be wrong, but the other side was filled with assholes, I'd probably stick with my beliefs. And it would take a lot for me to really just know that my beliefs are wrong and I'm causing harm before I'd switch side to the assholes. I was like, you're not giving them any options. You're not. So you can't engage that way. You can't bully them. You can't have the sense of superior. Only atheists are rational. Are you kidding me? But I get into all these fights with them. And so I changed the name. We actually still have the domain, the Atheist Codex, and that's still you lose all your SEO, you lose everything when you switch over to a different domain. So it's still under the domain, the Atheist Codex, but we changed the name to the Humanist Codex. It is a first and foremost, it does two things. First, it is a repository for atheist arguments and anti-theist arguments, and you can sort of look up actually by. So let's say you got hit with a certain apology. and you want to find out more about that apology and how it works. You go, you look, you find the apologies, boom, there's that apology, presumably, hopefully. We do the sort of major ones because everything seems to revolve around these major ones anyway. Getting into some of the more minor ones, but so you can, if you want to understand an argument more, and so you can look up. So the formal codex is nothing more than a bunch of essays, usually in 5 minutes. The idea is every essay is 5 minutes, but every essay links to other essays so you can build your own curriculum. It's actually an education site. So you can build your own curriculum, find what you want to learn more about. Every picture you mouse over, you see who it is, where it came from. Every word that you might not understand, mouse over, poof, it tells you what the definition is, and you can so that's the idea behind the codex. And then the other half is a social networking site. So it integrates with Twitter, it integrates with Facebook. If you join, it can connect to all of those. Anybody who sees your profile can, if you want them to, see your social profile. And a lot of them can engage with each other. It can do live chat. It can, so, you just Zoom Hangout. You can do Google Hangouts. One of the reasons I've been sort of doing a little bit on that is because Hangouts is going to vanish. But it's just nice to be able to, so that if you make a group, and we have a group now of polytheists, and they're absolutely welcome. The theists are welcome, and we've had resources for, because that's the other one. If you're going through the deconversion process, for most people that hurts. That is difficult, and that has to be recognized. This notion that anybody should just be able to give up their religion and it's easy, and no, it's hard. So we actually had some counselors for a little while. We actually don't have, and it was informal. It was just like, look, these are ministers who've gone through it, and here's how you can find them on Twitter. We're not endorsing, but these are people who've agreed to talk to people and who help. So it was just sort of informal. We had those resources. We don't do advertising. And we've recently added a tiny bit of Google tracking just for analytics, but I've been hesitant to do that because I want it to be completely anonymous. And I want anybody to be able to go to that site, no tracking. You're not going to see your Amazon wish list go up there. And if you're on Amazon later, you're not going to see, hey, do you want to go to the Atheist Codex? Completely anonymous. We require a social network to log in. You can't just create an account. And the reason is if there's trolling, we know who's doing it and we can stop them. But we have a very strong privacy policy, but there's groups, there's chat, there's all sorts of stuff, and blogs. And we're slowly working into monetizing it. And we've had a couple of difficulties with it right now. The only monetization I have is a Patreon, and I mean that actually. The only monetization I have is a Patreon. I have one patron, very nice person, and I'm really glad. But that's it. I've got one patron, and hopefully a couple more at some point. But that's it. So it's it's still kind of in beta from a rebuild. We've rebuilt it. I'm really pleased with where it's going, and a lot of my friends are actually starting to go on there, and we're chatting there, and it's still really kind of in beta. Not a huge population there yet, but it's nice, and I'm enjoying it. So those are my projects.
I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
So super proud of you. Those are amazing things. And so you're an extraordinary atheist for humanism as well.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Definitely.
I'm phenomenally proud of that work. And it's funny because on Twitter too, I get this a lot. And I have memes that are against atheists. And it's like, I'm like, there aren't a lot of, so every now and then I'll just drop a meme on an atheist. They're like, what? It's just like, yeah, sorry, dude, but this is, you earned it.
Yeah, I'm not impressed by that. Mac isn't either. If someone's like, I totally owned a Christian, I'm like, oh my God.
How hard was that?
Yeah.
No, because I mean, when we stop being skeptical of ourselves, we leave ourselves open to our own falsehoods and bad arguments.
Yeah.
Which we don't want, because we want good arguments in the atheist community. Sorry, and also we need humanistic
ideas.
Yeah, ideas and attitudes.
Yeah.
When we're dealing with anyone from the other side, whether it be when we're talking politics or when we're talking about religion, I think Christy thinks that we should be more humanist when we come to these conversations.
Yes, I always say in my own head, I don't know what they know, and they don't know what I know unless we tell each other.
Right.
So they can't already assume what I'm assuming because they don't know these things. There was a time 2 years ago where I would have considered myself a believer of sorts, not, definitely not an atheist, but I didn't really even use that term, wasn't even in my vocabulary. I understood that it was a word. I knew what it meant. I just didn't know anybody that called themselves that. So to know just not too long ago, I would have been considered the idiot magical thinker. I can't look at people like that and expect to help them.
Well, it's not like you've suddenly changed. I mean, are you all of a sudden now 10 times more rational because you fixed, one? I don't think so. But I want to make a quote, and I like this quote. Now, it's I think 60 or 70 years old. It may not be quite that old. So, but it's a little condescending, but not too much, and I still like it, and I hope you guys will too. In the way skepticism is sometimes applied to issues of public concern, there's a tendency to belittle, to condescend, to ignore the fact that, deluded or not, supporters of superstition and pseudoscience are human beings with real feelings who, like the skeptics, are trying to figure out how their world works and what our role in it might be. Their motives are in many cases consonant with science. If their culture has not given them all of the tools they need to pursue this great quest, let us temper our criticism with kindness. None of us comes fully equipped. Carl Sagan.
Ah, yes. Daddy.
Daddy atheist.
Hail Sagan.
Daddy atheist.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really a perfect way to end the stream. Actually.
I thank you guys so much for having me on. I was so delighted, and it was marvelous.
All day I was like,
oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
I appreciate. Oh well.
And my wife said, and yesterday too.
Oh well.
Yes, because you're just you and your message needs to be way more places. Way more places. I mean, if I would have known that I could go to a place and talk to people that had been there without having to just watch people that have been there, I definitely would have. Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Well, it's been a delight. I will come back anytime you guys like. So I would be happy to come back again. I was told to maybe throw down a couple links in the live chat. I don't have a whole bunch. I will do the I think the biggie, I guess, the Twitter. If you're looking for something that is gonna, I think it'll surprise you, and I think you'll enjoy it. Go see the Trump rant. That's on my channel. I will. That's not going to be what you're expecting. But yeah, no. In fact, that's the one. That one got. So the Water Thief. Sold a few thousand copies in a couple of years. The Trump rant, and the Water Thief took like 2 or 3 years to write. The Trump rant I did in like a week. It took a lot of prep. It took a lot of writing. 5,000 likes and shares in like the first day. So I think you'll like it. Give it a shot. It's up on the YouTube. I just threw my YouTube up, although you guys graciously have a copy of it. Why don't I put up the codex and then I'm done plugging all my stuff.
Yeah, and we'll have to post it under the video.
Oh well, thank you. Oh.
People who are not privy to the chat will have an option to check it out as well.
Yeah. Your channel's down there already. Your Twitter's not quite yet, but.
I did the Twitter, and why not put up at least just the Water Thief? The other one. Yeah, just to give you an idea on the other one. Actually, hold on a sec. So if you go into Quora, every now and then I do Quora. And not very often because I don't have a whole heck of a lot to contribute to it. But every now and then I do it. And if you look up under Quora, what is the scariest thing you've ever been told as a psychologist? Currently, I hold, last I checked, I don't know if it's current. Last I checked, I hold the number 1 spot for the answer. Yeah, and it wasn't, and it was interesting because hold on a second, I gotta get this right. You'd think I could find my own book, but no. it was one of those where I said, okay, I do know how to I do have an answer for this. It's pretty scary and but I was like, they're asking, and I think it's an intellectual website that want to know. So I posted, and I said, okay, now scale of 1 to 10 of all the stories I know, this is a 7. I'm not going to post higher than a 7 because I've just got some pretty bad stories. So here's the 7. It's in the book. This is it. And I got all this hate. You can't post that. That's the scariest thing I've ever seen. I was like, you asked. So it's still. So I think I'm still up there as the scariest thing as a psychologist that you've ever been told. And it wasn't even my. I mean, it was again. I was because I figured because I co-authored a book. The guy doesn't know how to YouTube, Quora, do any of that stuff. I was like, I'll put in, and I said, look, it's his story, but here's the scariest thing I've ever heard, and that happened with a psychologist. And hey, if you're going to go into psychology and you're going to go into prisons, you should probably know.
Yeah, that's really tough. I'm glad that people decide to do that, though.
I am too. So I won't link to that book. Yeah, that's the one where I'm saying I won't link to that one because that may be a little. And that's a very.
But people can ask you for a link if they really want to.
If they can, and they can always. Whoa, that's a big link. How that happened? That well exceeds. That's because
that's what she said.
Oh God, we're back on that again. Your mind is. You know what I've decided? I've discovered where your mind is, and I've decided that's probably one of the reasons you and I are going to get along really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why Mac and I get along. It's why his Lindsay, his wife Lindsay and I get along. It's why Mac and Lindsay get along. You'll fit right in here, Nick. I think a touch of naughtiness goes perfectly with a whole bowl of humanism.
Well, that's part of humanism. We're naughty. Excuse me for having to point that out.
It's the little things in life. Or is it?
Yeah, I was not gonna. Oh God! Is she gonna come on? Is she gonna come on? Do we get to actually who's saying all these things?
Comes on a lot.
Okay.
Strong and often. I'm gonna cut you guys off though because we do need that.
All right.
Real quick, thank you, live chat, for staying with us so long. You guys were wonderful. Please don't forget to share the link out, like, subscribe, especially to Nick here. His channel is linked below. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. We'll see you again next week, and I believe we'll have the Raging Atheist with us. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, that'll be good.
Close this out.
Okay, I know how to do that. Stay humanist, for God's sake.